Hi, this is Sean Hafer, and in this tutorial we will be getting into an introduction of the graph editor in After Effects and exploring ways to create some more exciting and more realistic animation using the graph editor. Alright, so I've got a preset file. You can download that, and I've already unzipped it. I'm just going to go in here to the folder and see what we've got real quick. So we've got our After Effects file, AE intro speed graph. We've also got some footage here. We've got a little cicada. And if you are anywhere in 2021 right now where the Brood X is all over the place, you'll understand why I've got the cicada in here. Just an Illustrator file I created. We've got Union Terminal layers inside here. Union Terminal. And again, created in Illustrator. That's just an AI file. And then I've got a Photoshop file of a clock I created in Illustrator, but I brought it over into Photoshop and set it up there. So we've got just a variation of files to use. Okay, so if I come in here now, let's go ahead and open up our intro speed graph After Effects file. Okay, so you can see here we've got 4 comps. I'm going to go ahead and close this graph editor one here. And O1 eases is what I want to go, so I'll just double click that. It's already open down here. And you can see here what we've got. We just have 4 cicadas. These are all Illustrator files. I've already set position keyframes. It's a 3-second composition. And at 1 second they start moving. At 2 seconds they stop moving. So just moving across the screen. So what we're going to do here is just a quick revisit to our basic ease types in After Effects. So by default, when we look at if you don't see your position, go ahead and hit P on cicada, roll down your position. And you can see here that we've got our normal keyframes are those diamonds. Those are linear keyframes. So in this, we can look up here. I'm going to just zoom in with my mouse wheel. And we can see every keyframe, each dot represents a frame, and all of our frames are evenly spaced, the motion over it. So if we think about that idea of timing and spacing from the principles of animation, we can see that spacing is even, right, as it moves across. So let's go down to cicada ease out. And what I want to do is just select this first keyframe, right click, keyframe assistant. We're going to do easy ease out because we're coming out of the keyframe. Or Command or Control Shift F9. And now if we play these two, we can see they still end at the same time, but it's a slower ease, right? It's starting out from 0 and slowly speeds up and accelerates to get its momentum going. So a little more realistic. Okay, now if we go to our third one here, cicada ease in, you can guess what we're going to do. Let's just go to this last keyframe, select it, right click, and go to keyframe assistant and easy ease in. So just easing that last one. So we can see here, let's go ahead. I'm going to shift select all 3 of these. And we can see our spacing here, tighter than loosens up, right? So more time in the beginning, less movement. Now here, starting out even, and then tightens up at the end as it slows down. So again, thinking about that timing and spacing. So if we hit spacebar here, again, quick start, because it's got to make up that time to let it slow down at the end with that ease in. And then our old favorite, let me hit stop here. And we come back to our select both, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease or F9. And now that'll ease out and ease in. Let me zoom out. There we go. So again, ease out, ease in. So that's kind of the most comfortable one. It feels good. It's accelerating, then it's decelerating. You also might remember that you can come in if you just right click and go to keyframe velocity. we can see how fast that's happening, that influence percent. So by default, that's 33%, and the outgoing is 33%. So now let's take a look at what the graph editor can do for us. So let's go ahead and go to our O2 graph editor comp. We just have one cicada now. And again, same thing, 1 second to 2 seconds, nothing going on. So to get to the graph editor, we basically just click on this. Depending on what you've got selected down here, you may see something different. So mine is on auto select graph type. You also have edit value graph. These are our value graphs. You also have edit speed graph. And this is our speed graph. And we'll look at both of those here in a second. So I'm going to leave mine on speed graph for now. And just so we can see what's happening. So this is basically just a velocity graph or a speed graph. So we can see here, this is 1,000 pixels per second. This is 0 pixels per second. So it is just graphing the speed this is traveling. So as we move forward, it immediately starts, right? So we're at 0, it's down here, 0 pixels per second. And then once we hit this first second in that first keyframe, this is the same thing as the keyframe in our timeline. So if I select that and I go back to my timeline, you see it's lined up, it's selected here, and it's selected here. So at that keyframe, then all of a sudden it jumps up to 963 pixels per second. And then once it gets to the end of 2 seconds, boom, drops back down to 0. And that's because we have linear keyframes. Now if we come back in here and let's easy ease these, so F9 or right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease. So again, play it. We know what's going to happen. Ease is nice and gentle. Now if we come back to our graph, it becomes this arc or this parabola, right? So we've got this happening. So if we come in here, now we see immediately at 1 second, it slowly speeds up. We can see that pixels per second ratio going up as I roll over here till it reaches a maximum of 1,444, and then comes back down to 0 and eases out. So if we watch that here, there's our ease. Now the speed graph is great for position, simple position motions. It's very easy to manipulate, very easy to understand. So if we come in here and we select this first keyframe, if I move this further towards the keyframe, the influence, you'll see I'm going to go down to basically 0.001 or whatever. And the same thing here. Now that basically looks like it did before. We've basically turned it back into linear motion again. If I come back down here though and pull these out, and you can see that influence, we know that easy ease is somewhere around 33%. So that's where the easy ease would be. And let's just see, pull this one out to 33-ish. Okay, and that's basically what we had when we got it. But if we took these even further, let's take them up to 80% or so. And this is auto scaling. So this little checkbox here, that's why it's sort of goes out of the frame and comes back. Because we can see now it goes up to 5,000 pixels per second approximately. So now it'll be a much slower ease, really fast, and then slow ease out. Okay, and you can start to see where you could create just by playing with your curves here. Faster ease outs, faster ease ins. You can also move your keyframes in time. So if I select this one, and I'm like, you know what, 2 seconds is too long, or 1 second is too long, you know, I could come in here, hold down Shift, and nudge this along so it's quicker, right? So it's less time. I'm going to undo that. So that's the basics of the speed graph here, okay? So that's what's going on. So let's kind of set this back to where it was more of the easy ease. Drag these back out. Okay, somewhere like that. That looks fine. Now let's look at our value graph. Now value graphs are, and the way to change that again, just come down here, edit value graph. So value graph, what's happening is we are seeing the actual values, not just the speed or the velocity, we're seeing the values change. So if we come down here, this is our X. We are at 156 pixels at 1 second. And then as we go forward, we ease in, come up, going faster, and then we end up at 1,119 pixels at 2 frames. Our Y, we're not moving, right? So that just is at 344. That's just where that is, and it doesn't move. So if we came in here and we wanted to adjust these, now the thing is we don't have our handles. The reason for that is by default, this is just adjusting both of these at the same time. So if I grab one of these, I can make it shorter in time, right? So now it's faster. Undo that. I could even move them up and down. So now it doesn't go as far. Or I can move Y up. So now that pixel difference is 488. So again, we're going from 0, 0 there. So it's actually moving down, but even though this is going up. And we can just say, so you can make actual value changes here in the value graph. Let me undo those two. Now, if we wanted to adjust those separately and get those Bezier handles, we want to come over to position and we need to separate the dimensions. So I click on that. Now I can click each one separately. It doesn't select both, right? So I could come in here and where we wanted sort of that parabola with the speed, slow to fast to slow, here since we're moving up, we want an S curve. If you hold down Shift, it'll align to that sort of straight line there. Same thing here. So we could come in here and create some nice S curves. And now that will give us an ease and an ease out. If we wanted to make this really come in fast, to an abrupt start, you can see now what's happening, right? It's coming and then boom, getting to its final point right up there. So you could do a lot of interesting things this way. Again, if you wanted it to start out really fast and then ease slowly into something that's already, boom. So if something's popping on, the way to really understand these are just to explore them, right? And you just need to move forward. Now you can even overshoot, right? So even though we've got this here, if I had another keyframe in here, and let me bring this, let's create our sort of little S curve again. Now, if I came in and created a new keyframe in the timeline, or you can just draw a new one with your pen tool. So I can come up to my pen tool, and let's add a keyframe here. And go back to my selection tool, or V. And if I came in and sort of straighten these out, and wanted to ease this, so what I could do is move this up higher. So now it is going past in pixels, right? Past 119. So now we're going all the way up to 1,229. So if we do this, it's going to overshoot. So you could do overshoots like we've done in the past by setting keyframes in the timeline. But you could also come in here and start doing some things. So we'll get into those a little further later, but that's just, again, some of the cool things you could do inside the value graph. Now if we go back to our speed graph now, You can see this gets a little funkier, right? Because speed-wise, it's going here, and then really quickly, since it's overshot, it's going back this way. So it can get really funky really fast. We're going to keep it pretty simple during this tutorial, but we will get into it more in later tutorials. Okay, so speed graph right there. Speed graph versus value graph. Let's jump to our clock pendulum and see how this could work with rotation as well. Okay, so here we've got a clock and its little pendulum, and we can come in here and we've got our clock here. It's just a Photoshop layer. Pendulum right there, and then we've just got a light gray background solid. So what we want to do, let's go ahead and look at our pendulum. We're going to want to have this rotate, you know, swing underneath the clock. So the first thing we want to do is bring that rotation point up to the top here. So I'm going to zoom in, use my hand tool to sort of get where I need to go. Now again, go up here to our pan behind tool or hit Y. I'm going to select this, and then once I start moving, hold down Command or Control, and you can snap, right? So I want to go right up to sort of where I think that pivot would be, let go, and now I should be good to go. Okay, so now we can come back here, go to our Move tool or hit V, and we can move that up to where we want it to swing from. So just pick a spot, kind of center it up. All right, that looks good. Now, so if we hit rotate on this now, on this pendulum, and we go to hit R for our rotation, now we can see that it's going to swing where we want it to swing, right? Okay, so let me zero that back out. So what I'm going to do, we've got 3 seconds here. So I want to start it with its swing already happening. So let's come in here and let's move this out to, let's say 20 degrees. All right, that looks good. And set a keyframe. All right, make sure you're not in your graph editor. So we set a keyframe there. And we're going to go forward to 15 frames. And then let's set this to -20. All right, and that should be our clock. And what we can do now is let's go ahead and select both of these keyframes, and we'll move to 1 second. I'm going to copy with those keyframes still selected. Make sure your rotation is selected, and then paste. I'm going to move forward to 2 seconds and paste again. And then our last frame, might as well paste again. There we go. So now if we hit play, we've got a very linear clock moving, right? So not too exciting, but again, some clocks, we kind of expect a certain look from a pendulum. So our mind may be tricking us to feel it's easing a little, but it really isn't, right? We know that it is being very linear. So let's see what we can do here. So we could come in. We know that we'd want to ease out of this, right? Well, let's see what happens if we just select all. So let's go ahead and go to our rotation. And we've got all our keyframes selected. And we can just say, all right, let's go ahead and easy ease these. Keyframe assistant, easy ease. Now let's see how that feels. Maybe a little better, but really with the pendulum, we expect it to hang at each side, correct? So this is where we could go into our graph editor and see what we've got that we can do. So if we look here, we are in our speed graph. So what we'd want is here, we'd want our speed to be pretty slow, right? We want it to be basically at 0. And then here in the center of these guys, we want it to flatten out a little. We want it to flatten out So it's got some time to hang. So again, you can see we're creating those peaks for the speed. As I roll forward, right? So we're there. We want that to hang there a little longer. So let's try and flatten that out a little. Next keyframe, same thing. And then get to our last here. And then this one. The same thing here, because we want that. All right, let's see what that feels like. There we go. So again, it could take some tweaking, but now it's got that swing, faster acceleration, and hangs a little at the edges. And that's what we expect with something like a pendulum. So getting into that graph editor and just that speed curve there works really well. Now, if we switched over to our value curve to see what that looks like, our value graph, okay, again, flatter. So maybe this one is where I said where sometimes, depending what you're using, it might make more sense to use value versus speed. So this makes more sense logically to me looking at it, the value graph of, oh, it's peaking, it's kind of smoothing off, flattening at the top, slowing down, speeding up down the ramp, and then slowing down again. So that might be, one of the ways, one of the decisions you make of which one to use when. And if we want to schnazz this up again, we could come in, let's make all these 3D layers. And okay, they're all 3D layers now. And let's throw in a light layer, new light. Point light is fine. And now we've got a nice sort of vignette. And let's go ahead and make sure we're casting or receiving shadows and casting shadows. So on my clock and my pendulum, scroll down to material options. And we want to make sure that we have cast shadows on. Oops. On, not only. If you do only, you'll just get the shadow, right? And then we want to make sure our light, and let's see, so material options, cast shadows is on, and we want to make sure that our solid is receiving shadows. Accept shadows is on, that's great. And let's go ahead and go to our, again, I'm in Classic 3D. If you're in Cinema, make sure you go back to Classic 3D. I'm going to go to 2 views so we can give ourselves a little distance here. So let's go up to the clock itself. Let's pull it a little bit off the wall. Let's go to the pendulum. Still behind the clock, but away from the wall. Then we get our shadows. And then let's go to our light itself. And let's bring that up. So the way I drew this, we've got some shadows cast as if the light's from above. So I'm going to go ahead and sort of center this up and then bring that light up above. And actually, I'm just going to kind of I'm going to come in here and try and line that up. That's pretty good. So right there, that looks good. So it lines up with my shadow. One other thing I'm going to do, though, is let's go ahead and, on that point light, let's soften those shadows. So we can go into our light options. I'm going to go to fall off inverse square. Bring my intensity. False radius up. So we get a little more of that. All right. And then we want to also bring that shadow darkness down so it feels about the same. So I've got it at 33, and then we can give a little bit of fusion if you want a little softer shadow. But I don't think we need very much if we do, because it's give it like 5. All right, and so now that matches the lighting of the illustration, right? But what's cool now is we get the shadow on the moving parts will adjust. So I'm going to go head back to my single view. Oops, undo that. There we go. So now we can see it's a little more moody clock. Let it render through. Great. And if we wanted to, we could adjust our light. Fall off. Distance and fall off radius if we need a little more light there. Or maybe just want a little more intensity. There we go. So we've got our shadow matching our illustration. We've got our nice ease on our pendulum, and we've got our 3D layers kind of creating their own shadows. All right, so let's stop that, and let's do our last little example in this tutorial. So let's open up O4 Union Terminal. So basically I just created this in Illustrator, brought it over, and imported it as a comp, and kept layer sizes. You can see these are all Illustrator files, and what we want to do, we might want to use some shape layer modifiers on here. So once we bring in Illustrator files, we can convert them to shape layers. So let's go ahead, select everything. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to Create Shapes from Vector Layer. And now you can see it created all these shape layers. So we've got doubles. Now it does turn off all of our Illustrator files, so we don't see both. But if you don't think you're going to need those anymore, you could go ahead and just Command or Control click your AI files. And then just delete those. We still have them up here in our folder, Union Terminal Layers, if we need them, but now they're just out of our comp. All right, so we've got this Union Terminal. Again, we're at 3 seconds. So what we want to do is let's have this sort of create itself or grow on or pop on, right? So let's think about what we can do here. So we're going to start with we've got our main building, right pillar, left pillar, entrance, arch, columns, center columns, the clock, and then our ground. All right. So what we could do first, let's think about we'll leave our ground for last, but let's go ahead and just see what we've got here. So let's start at about 5 frames in, or actually we'll start at 0. And let's hide everything except for our main building, just so we can really see what we've got. So we'll select on this, we've got a shape layer. So what we want to do is let's have this scale up. Now, so I'm going to go ahead and let's start at 0 frames, hit S for scale. And we're going to start at 0. Make sure we've got that stopwatch checked. Let's move forward, 15 frames. See how that feels. And let's bring it up to 0. And let's bring it up to 100. Okay, so now we've got that. Okay, there's a couple not great things about that. So let's go ahead and let's make it a little faster. Let's bring it down to about 10 frames. And again, it is scaling from its center point, right? So let's go ahead and let's move that center point down, or its anchor point. So go to our Y for our pan behind tool. And let's grab that again, hold down Command or Control to snap, and let's snap it to the bottom. Now let's see how that feels. Okay, better. We could easy ease it. See how what that does for us. Everyone loves a good easy ease. So F9 or keyframe assistant easy ease. Okay, a little better, a little better. Let's think about, let's go into our graph editor. So we're going to come in here, got scale selected, and let's go to our graph editor. All right, so in our speed graph, that's fine for this. I'm going to select those keyframes. And let's go ahead and let's give that a little more punch. Okay, that feels good. Now, this is where maybe we'd want an overshoot, right? So at that point, we could go into our value graph, and we could add an overshoot there. We could come in back to our frames if we wanted to, and just come back to our timeline and say, all right, well, I know we want to overshoot, so maybe here one frame before, let's scale that up to maybe 110. See how that feels? All right, so that feels good. It's fast. Now, is it going to be too jarring? I don't know. We'll find out a little later. Let's just see how we go. But okay, I like that. I think that's pretty good. Boom. We've got that happening. So now we can come in, and if we wanted to, since we like that, if we like this and we think, okay, this is kind of good, let's throw this on. Let's go ahead and copy those keyframes and select all of these others. Hit S for scale. Let's go ahead and just paste them in. So now, if we turn everybody on, boom, we're done. That's it. The animation is over. Okay, no, so, but that is one way to get sort of, we've got those pasted in and we can see what we want to do. So now let's go into our, let's turn off these again, and let's do our main building outline, right pillar, left pillar. So let's go ahead and see what we've got there. So I'll turn off all of these. So we know, now what we want to do here, let's think about this. This makes sense to come from the center, but since these are kind of on each side, first off, let's go ahead and select left and right pillar, and we'll just nudge these over a little. Go to our V for Move Tool. Make sure you're in Move Tool. Nudge these over. Couple frames. And see what we want. Okay, so that's feeling okay. And then maybe I'll even grab this one. So we want to go left pillar first, then right pillar. So if I go left pillar, this right pillar, we want to move down a little further. So let's see how that feels. Okay, so that's starting to happen. So another thing here is, even though we've got these keyframes set, right, on these two right pillar and left pillar, if we can still move our anchor point. So I could come in here and let's make this one go, again, I'm holding my command. Let's go from this corner, and then on left pillar, let's go from this corner. All right, let's see how that feels. So now it's coming in, zooming up. Those start zooming up, boom, boom. A little bit offset, okay. Great. So now we've got that, and that just feels a little nicer, those contrasting coming in from their corner points, since they are sort of those side bits. All right, and now let's see what we've got next. Entrance outlines. So let's turn that on and see what that is. Okay, so that's our sort of entrance here at the bottom. What else do we have? Windows. So again, we're playing with the idea of where they're layered in Photoshop so they're on top of each other so they're visible, right? And they're in the right layer space or the right order, forward and back. But we may animate them separately. We don't have to necessarily animate them in that order. We just want to, we know that these things have to be in certain spots. So this one here, let's go ahead and do our, let's see, what do we got to do? What else do we have here? So we've got all of these. So we come in. All right, so let's do our entrance, but let's do it. Figure out where we're at. Hit V for my move tool. So maybe after. And then let's have that come down from the top. So move entrance over here. And again, let me move forward a little bit so we're at full size. Y for our anchor point tool. And then control or command and boom, snap it up there. So let's see how that. So it comes there. Okay, that's fun. All right. Now, I don't know. See, this is a point where I don't know if that overshoot should happen. Since it pounces out of our realm of that building. I think things growing up and growing in, it makes sense. But since this is coming down from the top, I kind of want it just to end there. So let's go ahead and go to our scale. And I might go ahead and just get rid of this keyframe. Okay, I'm going to nudge that maybe a little faster even. Cool. And let's go back to V, so move this in. And again, what's nice is with these keyframes preset, we can get these very roughed in, and then we can always come back in and adjust. So we're going there. That looks good. Window outlines. So I think our arch should probably come in first. And let's turn off our columns and our window outlines for now. So again, this is really what we're looking at so far. All right, and let's move this arch outlines down. Okay. So arch outlines from the bottom, I think, would make the most sense. So let's go to our tool here as far as our anchor point. Hold down again, Command or Control. Snap it down. Let's see how that feels. Okay, nice. So that feels good even with the bounce. That's good. And we're drawing on. And then let's bring in our windows. Maybe as that. Again, overlapping action is always nice. So let's go ahead and turn on our windows here, window outlines. And maybe about here. Let's make sure. On this one, though, I'm going to get rid of these scale keyframes. So hit my S, turn those off. I'm going to mask this one in. So let's go ahead and go to my window. Oop, I accidentally turned off my arch outlines. Let me undo that. Sorry. Go to my window outlines and scale, S for scale, and let's turn that off. And so let's see, make sure this is working. Did I mess something up? Boom. Yep, I moved that one. So my arch outlines, let's bring that back in. I'd move that on accident. See how that feels. All right, cool. All right, now our window outlines. Select that one, and we can now have that start after our arches come in. So maybe somewhere right about here. And what I'm going to do is come into Window Outlines, go up to my pen tool. Now remember, we want to create a mask on another shape layer. So we want to select Tool Creates Mask right here. And let's just draw okay, we'll draw that. And then we can go to our Move tool. Let's grab this point and get that set up. Okay, there we go. So now what I want to do is go to my mask shape. So again, I'm at the beginning here. Masks. Mask 1. Mask path. And I'm going to go forward, I don't know, 10 frames. And then let's set that mask path at being up. And then let's go back to the beginning. So I'm going to come in here, select my top 2 mask path key points, and drag those down so it's below there. All right, and let's see how that works. Cool. So now that looks like it's building on, even though it's just the one thing with lines. Feels good coming up. And if we want, we can go ahead and let's take those two. Let's go to our graph editor. And they're linear right now. So if we come in here, we can select both of our keyframes. Shift select. And then we've got an easy ease right over here if we want. So we can just go ahead and do an easy ease. And then we can crank those up closer to how our other ones are working. So let's see how that feels. Good. Okay. So now let's get back to our get out of the graph editor. We're moving forward. Doom, 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 doom. Okay. And so let's think about what's next. Column outlines. So let's do our 2 main ones. So center column. And for those, we'll have those grow up. So as this comes in, that goes up. And we'll have these main ones grow up. Actually, we could do all of them growing up. So let's just go ahead and that should be fine. So let's make sure our axis point is where we want it. So arch out, let's see, columns outline, Y for our axis point. Make sure you're somewhere where it's, fully drawn in. Control, move that down. We'll have those grow up. Same thing with our column outline or center column outlines. Let's bring that down. Let's move those in. So that draws. And then maybe as that is filling up, center columns get started. Make sure your move tool. Nice. Okay. And then let's look at column outlines. And those can just come shortly after. Okay. So that's looking good. And then let's look at, what do we have left? We have clock outlines and then our ground. So let's do our clock first. So for that one, I think we can leave it in the center for sure. And let's see how that looks. Clock outlines. Let's bring that in. That's our kind of final. Yeah, and that bounce feels good from the center. Boom. And then our ground, let's turn that on. let's do something a little different with that. So I'm going to go into my ground. Let's go to our scale keyframes, turn those off, and make it 100. And let's use our trim paths on this, and we'll have this sort of draw in from the center first. So we'll go to our ground outlines. Let's roll that down, get to our shape. So contents. We got group 1 and group 2. So what do we got? Group 1 is that. Group 2. So group 2 is basically just our artboard. So we could get rid of that. We don't need it. But if we look at group 1, we can come in here. That's our path. We can see our stroke, and everything is editable if we need to. It's got the round cap, just like I drew in Illustrator, so everything came over fine. The one thing you want to do is use uniform paths or uniform stroke when you do create your Illustrator files so that it will come over with all of that information. All right, cool. So we've got that. It's looking good. Let's go ahead and add a trim path. So we've got our contents, group 1. Let's go add trim paths. And what we want to do, let's come in here and do our trim paths, and we can do our start and end, right? So if we do 50 and 50, then we'll be sort of nothing, right? So what's kind of nice here is we could say, let's start at 50-50, set those two. Then let's go forward a little bit. And we want to bring our start down to 0 and our end up to 100. Let's see how that feels. Yeah, so that feels good. So I think that's just a nice, we don't really need the bounce. Now, if we wanted to bounce, we could go, again, scale that up a little and then go to like 100, then back down to maybe 96 or something. But it feels like it's bouncing because we've got all these other things bouncing. Now, this might be a little fast, you know, who knows? And let's say we said, all right, let's go ahead. And the big thing with all of this is that it's about how it feels and what you're trying to get across. If this was a very high energy music behind, perhaps, and it was about, you know, the wrap up of a commercial for the Union Terminal, then this might be great. If it was something, maybe you needed to slow them all down, that could be another option. But again, that now getting in and fine tuning that is where you can go. But what's nice is by creating those, using the graphs, we can create a much more exciting and more natural kind of motion versus if we, you know, just relied on easy ease. And that's the thing of going for that next step from easy ease is getting in and really controlling your motions and how your eases and pauses and everything can happen, which is really the excitement of motion design. One last thing here, let's throw in a layer, new, solid, and I guess we could try that, see what that feels like. Drag it down to the bottom, and, you know, and then if we had something like Union Terminal or something come in with some text, you could do that. All right, well, I hope this served as a good intro to your graph editor. And again, it was just sort of scratching the surface on the things we can do inside of this editor, but it's something to ease into and really just to experiment with. Don't wait until you're in the middle of a project to start messing with the graph editor. Do it with some simple things like, you know, some shape layers. Just really start to feel how that works and what you can do and what kind of things you can create. And then when you get to that middle of a project, you'll have that sense of, oh yeah, let me just tweak this one here and move this Bezier handle here, and I'll get what I want. There are also lots of plugins that you can get that can help you just sort of save your favorites and different things. And I'll put a few links to those in the description below. All right, well, I hope this helped. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.